Hi again, everyone. I am back for part 2 of our little sketch of a corner in Venice, Italy. Here I'm going to, obviously I'm going to add color, but I'm going to try to emphasize the story I was trying to tell of 3 connected shapes of value: light, midtone, dark, and then this articulated shape within an overall shape will help connect all those 3 values. And also, if I do this correctly, it will help establish this convincing illusion of foreground, midground, background, just by modulating the values. It's a very, I don't want to say it's a very easy thing to do, but it is a comparatively easy thing to do in watercolor when you have it as your goal, when you know that you can do it. It's not understanding that, I think, that causes people the most grief. Or just this general sense that you have to paint everything on the paper just because it's there. You just don't. One of the great strengths of watercolor is the parts of the painting you don't paint can be just as important, sometimes more important, than the parts of the painting that you do paint. So watercolor is a bit subtractive in nature, meaning we start with 100% of the light of the pure white paper, and we begin to subtract away from it by adding tones, values, color. And what that does ultimately is reveals the light underneath. So here I'm just using a mid-size mop brush, one of my brushes, Thomas W. Schaller brushes from Neef. They're a series of mops, meaning they hold a lot of water so you can cover big areas. And I'm using midtones. We're in the midground, but I want to use midtones here, so not too much real light, maybe some sparkle saved, but definitely nothing too dark, because that will be reserved for this area. I'm using, this is a burnt sienna, pretty watered down. The yellow is a, what is it? Well, it's a mistake, really. It's a bit of French ochre, but it has some cerulean in it. Doesn't really matter. It's not a specific color that's important. It's just sort of a warm yellow, a little lighter at the top because it would probably pick up a little more sunlight, and then this will get a little darker at the bottom. So to that end, I'm dropping in a little cobalt more near the bottom of this big shape. Then I want to connect in the bridge so nothing is detached, and bring it right down into the water area itself. So this is the same series of those brushes, Neef mops, but this is a smaller one, which are great. They still hold a lot of water, but they're smaller and keep this beautiful point, so you can imply some detail without getting too fussy about it, and then open it up into a much wider area. The goal here is just to add some variety to the color, but again, nothing really too dark, not too much too light. This is still a very wet wash, so I'm dropping in some additional cobalt just to try to get a nice toggle between cool and warm. It's a little teal that I love, maybe too much, but I love this color. Kind of hesitant. It's a little brighter, and I don't want this mid-tone area to pull forward, but I think we're fine. So wet and wet, just to try to keep the amount of edges and specific looking line work to a minimum. Softer edges help things appear to be further away from us as well. A crisped edge, well, it doesn't mean you can only use them in the foreground, not at all, but something that has a very crisp and defined edge is going to obviously appear more in focus. So it's going to appear, it may well appear closer to the viewer than something that's in soft focus or has a soft edge to it. So it's one of the great superpowers of watercolor, the painter's ability to modulate and vary the kinds of edges that he or she uses. Edges in watercolor are just an endless source of magic. So all this, I'm painting on a slanted easel. It's really about 20 degrees. I prefer to paint with much more slant, but the filming looks better when I have it a little flatter. But the point is, it's not a flat board or piece of paper on my desktop. The other big advantage that we have in painting in watercolor is the ability to use gravity. Water runs downhill, I'm led to believe. So if you treat gravity as your friend, which in general life it rarely is, but in watercolor it really is your friend. You can vary the tilt. If you add more gravity, that wash will run faster, the colors will merge quicker. If you lay it flatter, the colors will obviously run slower, merge more slowly. They can also, if you're painting very wet, you can tilt the board and have the paint run in a direction that you might prefer. Really helpful when you're painting skies, things like that. So what I've done is tried to obscure the demarcation of land or the building and the water. I just want the water to grow up into the buildings, which is very characteristic if you're in Venice. It's what really looks like it happens. And also, it's one of the great other superpowers of watercolor. Its ability to make one thing just become another thing. The building can just organically grow into the water, and it can just look very intentional, beautiful, natural. Right along the shoreline, I'm dropping in some mineral violet by Holbein. It's just a beautiful purple that's not a dye based. It's very transparent, sort of a gentle violet color. Now I'm just finishing off the bottom. All right, nothing wrong. I wanted a little more specificity there, so I think I got it. I wanted a little less specificity up top, and I should have misted the top as it bleeds into the sky. I want the top of that to really literally bleed into the sky. I want a harder edge here, but not up here so much. So it was a little after the fact, but I just moistened it with my mist gun and using a paper towel just to soften that edge. Yes, that's better. So I sort of want the look of this mid-tone, mid-ground building to just bleed and melt organically up into the sky and keep whatever clarity there is down here in our bullseye, our center of interest. I streak some of that across, which I think is fine. I have to be very protective of this saved white though, so I can eat away some of it, but I want to be careful. Generally good advice to, if you know an area needs to be quite light or white, just save it as long as possible. You can always get rid of it later, but you can almost never reclaim it entirely, so better to save it as light, as long in the painting process as you can. So now the light area is already painted. It's the paper. The mid-tone area, it's not done, but the main tones are dropped in. As I proceed with the painting, I can then assess more easily later on how much more, if any, articulation or detail this side needs. Hopefully not much. I think it reads pretty clearly now, but it looks about right in terms of value and tone, and just sort of a suggestion of detail without too much line work or hard edges that would tend to make it pull forward. So now I want to get the basic values laid on my big dark shape. One bit of advice, again, not a rule, I detest rules, but works for me. If you want a shape, a larger shape especially, to read as dark, it does not mean that the whole shape should be painted with black or gray or, God forbid, Payne's gray or indigo or some sad color like that. What it means is you can inject a lot of life, luminosity, color, unexpected color within a shape that's meant to read as a shade or a shadow, but as long as the leading edge of that big shape, meaning where the darkest part of that shape will intersect or meet the lightest part of another shape, if that shape edge is dark and clear, you can get away with a lot of color injected into the rest of that shape. Rather than talk about it, it's better if I just do it. Turn the board on its side, it'll make it easier for me to protect the white, to articulate this dark shape, and then to grade it out and drop in some bright color. And again, advice, if I can give it, don't be afraid to turn your board this way or that. Whatever makes it easier for you to reach, for you to employ gravity to your own advantage, please do it. This is French Ultra and a little cobalt, I think, but I'm mixing it with neutral tint without too much water to get pretty dark. I'm using one of these smaller mop brushes so that I can get a pretty crisp, clean edge. This boat is the leading edge of the dark shape, so it's going to carry a lot of darkness. Just sitting here thinking, what, if any, color do I want to inject into this? In reality, inside the boat, there's a lot of color. I'm not sure what's in there, and I don't want to look at the reference. But I think probably some upholstered seats or some kind of color. And I'm hemming and hawing. I'm thinking I might inject some quite bright red into this. If I do it wet into wet, I'll save a few little sparkles of pure light, but not too much because this is a major dark area. And just let it bleed. Let it bleed into the dark. I think that's good. Yeah, often little gondolas have quite bright upholstered seats or covers, and the outside of them is often a very dark, maybe even a black lacquer, very rich in color. So I'm not trying to be accurate so much as I'm just trying to enliven this dark shape, but definitely keep it dark. So that's another little bit of advice, that even in a very dark shape, you can drop in some very bright color, but again, the edge of the shape is quite dark, but up within it, there's some, I don't know if you want to call it unexpected, but some bright tones modifying it. To me, it's a better way of implying color than painting on dry paper showing little strips of upholstery. It's better to just show the sort of the idea, the concept of color. I saved a lot of little white spots, and I'm assessing how much are helpful and how much are hurting me. I use some gravity here to pull that red. It's a Mayan orange, Daniel Smith. Very transparent, bright orangish red. Similar in feeling, I guess, to a cadmium red, but it's much more transparent and less chalky. Nothing's wrong, but what's going through my mind is I know I have to connect this dark shape to the building. I don't think I'm going to paint in the figure yet. I think I'll wait till I get the tones of the building established and then lay him in after, so I'll have a crisper edge. Not sure what happened there, but it should be wet enough. I should be able to lift some of that. Yeah, I have paint on my hand or something. So anyway, generally I like this, but the key is now to keep going quickly before it dries too much, because I want to connect it definitely to the water, but also to the building going up. So there'll be sort of a toggle, I hope, between defined edges and lost edges. Procedurally, I think I'll work first on the area of water just below. So I'm going to use some, this is some Viridian, and I'm going to use some jadeite green in the water, but the key is to just do it quickly so it bleeds up into the boat, and the boat tones bleed down into the water. Gravity will come in handy. So that's similar to what I was doing over there, but in a darker register. I can get an intentional lack of definition between where one thing starts and another stops. So where the reflection will just grow organically down into the water. Yeah, that works more or less. I think some of these shimmer lines are a little too fat. I'd like them to look a little more elegant, so I'll skinny them up. Here, I'm going to just allow the back of the boat to melt into the building, as well as the water. I don't know what is happening. I don't see any paint on my hands, but I keep smearing it on the bottom of my painting. This is just clear water just to save myself the effort, so I can continue working here and not have a dark edge. I like this effect, but I want to enhance it, so I'm going to take some more neutral tint. It's probably got a little violet in it. Drop it into just that edge, just the way I was doing over there, to extend the length of this reflection down into the water. Add some more connectivity. Between elements. General look is good, but if you want to enhance the effect, mist bottle will come in handy, but a little goes a long way. Just add a little moisture, a little gravity, and all those tones will run together. Probably a little too much water, but no real harm done. Then I'm going to drop a little more of this Mayan orange in and let it also run down into the water. Hopefully, subtly, not make too big of a deal out of it. Gravity, gravity, gravity. It's not finished, but the overall effect is what I want. This sort of indistinct dialogue between found edges, lost edges, hardness and soft, clarity and obscurity. Yeah. I love the way the boat just melts into the dark shape. If I want to add more clarity later, it won't be hard to do, but I want to have the option to not do that as well. So if the boat was completely hard-edged and defined, it would be harder for me to do that. Trickier now is, I think I want the top of the boat to be a little more, much more defined than the bottom of the boat. So if I start painting the dark wall behind, I will melt that edge. I don't think I want to do that. So what I'm going to do is mist this zone so that I don't have a hard edge there yet. Then dry it off with a hairdryer to get it nearly dry, and then I will do the top part of the wall. There'll be more color in the water for sure, but I can feather that in when I paint in the rest of the wall. All of what I just did was just to get this effect happening, and I'm pretty happy with that overall. So yes, now I'm going to dry this off with the hairdryer. Sorry for the noise, just be a moment. So no, it's not 100% dry, but it's dry-ish, and I think this edge is dry enough that I can do the top portion of the wall. So I'm going to just use lots of warm tones, similar to what I did over here, but in a darker register. So I'm mixing up some available color for me here in the palette, some burnt sienna, some sepia, dark brown, some lighter brown, raw umber. I have some ochres there if I need them, blues and violets. All that should be enough. So just here along the edge, I want to be a little careful because, again, I want to preserve that line. This is not really advised. I always try to do the darkest elements at the last, but I needed to establish the edge of that dark boat. So painting up to an edge is very undesirable. It's always best to overlap. But I don't see much of an option here. I can try to just paint over that dark edge and hope it doesn't melt away. So this tone I'm using is just a warm raw umber. Right around the window there are some areas of exposed brick. I'm going to articulate them a little bit more later, but for now I'm going to just paint over everything, just sort of wet and wet. Go to a slightly larger mop. I'm going to even drop in some of this quite hot Mayan orange tone. This is a little bit of permanent orange. I'm using a bigger mop with quick marks to get some of these skip marks showing. But I am going to want this leading edge of this dark shape to be darker, so I'm going to drop in some violet. When you paint in that sort of dry brush way, you get these skip marks over the rough paper. Then you can get rid of them easily if you want, but if you like them, you can even enhance them. So here on that sort of ochre orange base tone, I'm dropping in some complementary violets just to show some of a hint, not an illustration, but just a hint of that, the texture of that brick stone wall behind. And here's some teal even. Love this effect. It's still going to read as dark. I don't want that hard line there, so before it dries too much, I'm going to mist it. And I will come back later to finish off the water area and melt the water up into the wall. Similar technique, a little bit different color I expect over there. So this is a medium to large mop brush. I'm doing this edge mostly in a violet. But as we get near the top, I'll become quicker and more gestural and sloppier about it. Then, I don't know, I I'm making myself not look at the reference photo because I know it'll just slow me up. So this is just some ochres. A lot of gestural painting. But overall, I kind of like that sparkle of light. If you use very rough paper like this, and on some dry brush marks, it can look like you've painted a lot of detail, even though you really haven't. So I'm always looking for ways to justify my laziness if I can. Dropping in a little teal here where those, what I remember to be dark green shutters, probably are. Do not mind if it looks kind of mysterious and undefined. I really am going for that. Again, I'm going in this painting an overall dialogue between the undefined and the defined. So clarity and obscurity. I like a little of that hot red I dropped in there, so I think I'll add a little more up here for balance. Perhaps a little up here as well. Don't want to overdo it, but I think the overall feeling looks very Venetian to me. One thing, one color, one tone just grows organically into another. Yeah, and then it all intensifies down near this corner, which is what I want. Part of that is deeper tones I used here, less water, more pigment, but part of it too is the pencil marks that I added in the first part of this video. Hardest part of painting is knowing when to stop, and I'm not good at that. I think that's enough of that red. Now what I'd like to do is address the water down below. There's this beautiful merging of the stone into the deep green water. Again, I don't want a hard line. So I'm going to start with this smaller mop brush. It's still pretty wet, but I'm just adding a little bit of clear water. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to use some of this dark brown. This is a sepia to imply some of the dark stone right along the base of the building before it hits the water. As you can see, I'm being intentionally not very careful. I'm not being illustrative, I'm being general. Bring a little of that tonality up into the building as well. Then I'm going to go back to this Viridian, which is not a color I often use, but I think in this case it's a nice kind of dusky green, and then mixed with this sepia, it'll make the transition from building to water a little more seamless. Now I'm going to toggle into this Daniel Smith Jadeite green, which is a much deeper, characterful green. It's very beautiful. It can look quite dusky. It has bits of minerals in it, so as it dries, they float to the surface and give it a translucency that's gorgeous. Okay, the tricky bit here is to pull it over this part of the water, which has already begun to dry quite a lot. Probably because I aimed a hairdryer at it. And that's fine, it's just I don't, again, want a hard line there, so I'll have to do a little retrofitting. It's just a light wash on the hull of violet just to keep that edge from forming. And this is some neutral tint. Painting watercolor, painting water, bodies of water in watercolor, nothing could be more natural, but we make it so hard, and by we, I mean me. I look at my older paintings, and even ones where I think I kind of did a good job on bodies of water. I am my own worst critic, of course, and what I would say where I went wrong, if anywhere, was in just painting too many marks in the water. If you just let the watercolor do the work for you, it just almost always looks infinitely better than painting in lots of stripes or reflections. Sometimes you need some, clearly, but I think generally less is more. Yeah, I look at my older paintings and I really wince, and they're all out there on the internet, but often my bodies of water look like plaid shirts with stripes going this way and that way, and just back off and let the water do the work. It looks so much better. So that said, I'm risking sort of overcooking this body of water here. I want to simplify this. I think it needs a little articulation, but not much. And I want to connect the left to the right side. Again, I can afford to eat away a little of the light, but that is key to the whole painting, so proceed with caution. Yeah, I think that'll do. I'm gonna drop a little bit of this deep green just where this ore touches the water. That would be a little highlight that'll help connect the shapes and sides of the painting. And then, before this dries much, right where the water meets the building on the left side, I want to do what I was starting to do over there, which is just drop in some deeper tones right around that indistinct edge where building becomes water, to sort of hint at it, imply it maybe, but not illustrate it. Water, of course, the moisture leaches up into the stone and brick and plaster of these old Venetian buildings and makes all these romantic marks, but they're literally lichen and moss and mold and God knows what else. But for all us romantic types, it's very beautiful. I think that's probably enough, on the verge of being almost too much, but I think not. I think it's fine. I think these marks are a little over the edge. I'll soften those. Generally happy with this. I think I want to resist the urge to put too many stripes or indices in the water. I'm going to try to keep it simple and atmospheric. I'm wondering about these marks. They weren't really planned, but they somehow feel like they work to add a little glint of light and a little connectivity. I'm not 100% convinced, but I think for now I'll just leave them. He says as he messes with them. Just reduce the size a little. Okay, everything's okay. At this stage, the painting's not done, but you can see the major shapes are established. The major dark, the major midtone, obviously the major light, and then the connecting elements in the bigger overall dark shape are knitting all parts of the painting together pretty well. Now, the big moves of the painting are done. Now it's time to assess each area to determine what else it needs to finish it off. Obviously, the figure needs to be painted quite dark and fairly literally. Bits of work need to be done around this area, of course. A little bit less up here, but some. But I think for now, because this is dry, I will turn my attention to this midground area and see what, if anything, it's needed. Good news, not too much. I think the overall value is just about right. It's mid-tone, it's warm, modified with cool. It looks to be in the midground, but I do think it needs some articulation. So I'm going to use 2 or 3 brushes, mostly flats, or perhaps all flats. Escoda has these beautiful flats, Perla series, but they come in smaller sizes, so I have them from 1/4 up to an 1/8 inch in width, and they're just perfect for this kind of, gosh, I hate the word detail, but articulation, detail, whatever you want to call it. So using them in a dry brush way on rough paper without much water, you can, if you press down, you can make a fairly solid line. But if you paint a line quite quickly, you can get these really lovely skip marks. And that dry brush expression is just something in watercolor I really love. So if you start quickly and then lift off, you get those nice aerated marks that sort of imply without directly stating. And that's the look I want. I want to be very suggestive about any kind of specificity of detail back here. We want this whole wall assembly to look far away. So we know the ways to do that are less saturated color, less value, but also less definition, softer edges, less clarity. You can do a window like that where there's just a tiny bit of specificity or detail, but not so much that it looks like a technical drawing. I love this kind of painting, and it's comparatively easy once you understand what you're doing, but it's also very easy to mess up and to overdo it, to over-articulate, or to do too much. It's just generally better to do a little less than more. The viewer, in the eye of the viewer, they can fill in so much detail and fill in the blanks. You don't have to tell them everything. In fact, you really shouldn't. I think often the strength of a painting is is found in what is not painted as much as what is painted. It's the bits of the painting that are painted less or unpainted completely that are often the most poetic and evocative. So if you can just back off and make yourself not paint a lot of things that you might instinctually feel like you ought to describe, you're going to be better off. So I think that's about enough. This bridge, I think I want it to have a subtle backlit feeling. So I'll give it a little bit more value as it intersects the building here, but I have to proceed with caution because I, again, don't want too much articulation, too much detail, and I definitely don't want any of this to pull forward and feel like it belongs in the foreground. So I'm adding some shade marks, for lack of a better term, but not consistently, just sort of erratically or sporadically across the surface. A tiny bit of emphasis of the arch of the bridge under. Again, I don't think I have to be too illustrative about it. I can just indicate a little and then fade it out. But that does help crisp up the light as well. People on top, I think better to just leave them. Yeah. Looks fine. How are we doing over here? I'm trying to avoid that hair dryer. That noise is so distressing to me. This is wetter than the top, so I can start to do a little articulation at the top of the painting. I'm going to use the same family of perla flats, very small, 1/8 of an inch. Some of the sepia, dark brown, I'll use to indicate some shadowing on some of the coining and these expressed stones, but again, just here and there, little bits. Not like I'm outlining or being too specific, or it's just going to draw too much attention to itself. This is a window with shutters open. So there'd be darker glass behind, but I do know introducing any real dark values this high up in the painting comes with a risk. So just a hint. At that point, that almost looks like too much, but this will get pretty articulated, so it may be fine. But I'm still going to soften up some of those tones a little. In terms of procedure, it would probably be wiser of me to articulate this area first, and then that'd make it easier to assess what, if anything, is needed up top. However, because this area is still drying, it's just a missed opportunity for me to not push ahead and do whatever I'm going to do up here first. So a little expression on the rusty red terracotta colored brickwork showing through. Doesn't need much. And I think you can see I'm trying to keep any added details over, mostly in this area. That part of the painting I want to leave untouched. We'll see if I'll be able to successfully resist. It is a problem. I love painting so much. Sometimes if I do a mark and I like the look of it, my instinct is to do another one right next to it just because it was so much fun. But that is a recipe for disaster usually. Using a larger flat to just do some dry brush indications. I think that approach works better than being too specific. As I get down here, I think I can allow myself to become a little more crisp and clear. Don't forget to paint with your fingers. Along with gravity, they're also free, generally. This little undercut with this curved corner, which I love so much. Just drop a little violet shadow under that, crisp up the light, articulate that detail just a little. Just because I loved it so much. You'll notice I am not looking at the reference photo. That's 100% intentional. I got a good idea what this looks like. My memory of it, I think, is solid. But if I looked at the reference photo, I would just unconsciously, instinctively start to feel that I've done something wrong because I've clearly moved things around and interpreted a lot of things. So I just don't need it. I think it'll slow me up and make me doubt myself. And we all have enough self-doubt. We don't need any more. Starting to get dry enough down here that I can push ahead. I don't have an entirely coherent plan for painting this window. I know the reality is one thing. Those bars through the window are not white. And again, it doesn't bother me what they really are, but what's going to look best in the painting. And I'm not so sure that keeping them pure white is the way to go. I want to keep them lighter, but not necessarily pure white. So I think I will give them an overall tone, probably a teal, as if they're painted green. Then as that dries, I'll paint the shadows on the glass behind them very dark. So this is a 1/2 inch flat brush, some cobalt teal, and I'll just lightly go over some of it, not 100%. Keeping it light, but killing most of the pure white, which again, I have sparkles here, a few there, a little here, but of course this is the main story. But tying it in elsewhere in the painting is not a bad idea to sort of lead the eye in. I think the thing to do here, while this is just a bit moist, is to indicate that greenery that I, for some reason, really wanted. So, these are more olive green for some of that. This is a Daniel Smith Serpentine. This brush is a liner brush with these long quills out of the top, a fatter barrel, very little water, and I'm just sort of scraping it over the surface of this rough paper so it leaves a lot of skip marks and makes this vine and this free-form shrub look very organic. And I'm working hard internally to convince myself that this is a thing I should have added. But if I'm honest, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, I think it's okay. Too late now, as they say. This is a very tiny Neef brush, number 1. So it's not a rigger, but it sort of acts like one. Just a very small round brush. And I'll take a little bit of dark, it doesn't matter what. Some of the sepia, very little water. I'll add some little hint of structure of some of these vines. Connecting. Yeah, I think that's fine. Right. How's this doing? This may be dry enough. I'll just take some neutral tints, deep purpley gray, and indicate the deep tones primarily just at the top of the window, and I can fade them out as they go down, maintaining a little sparkle of light there. Somebody's upset. Urban horn honking. I might be wrong, but I noticed that it really diminished, almost went away a couple of years ago, or a few years ago. But wow, it is back now in force. I don't think it has any effect on actual traffic. It just has the effect of expressing frustration and anger. So I assume there's more frustration and anger now. Well, they should go home and do a painting. Yeah, I like the way this is developing. I'm just internally assessing how much more attention it needs. Probably a little less than I initially thought. So dropping in a few dry brush marks of bricks with this red. This is so easy to overdo though. I want to try to keep it minimal. Very little water, just dry brush marks. I think not bad. A little articulation needed in the water, the ore, but first order of business is I'll paint in my standing guy here. I've not been avoiding him, it's just the time now to do it. What I am a little unsure is I might want to indicate a little more than just a dark tone. Yeah, he needs crisp edges and an overall dark shape. But just the way on a larger scale I dropped color and luminosity into a dark shape, I'd like to drop some into him as well. But I feel that painting in the traditional striped gondolier shirt would be a serious error. Just way too much specificity and detail for a sketch painting. So I'm trying to figure out in my mind how to deal with that. I think a little blue, perhaps a cool tone to contrast with the dark warms would be the way to go. Just some neutral tint, little bits of ripples in the water here under the ore as it breaks the surface, but again, this kind of thing is so easy to overcook. And I think that looks fine. The top of his figure, dark hair, also the backlit head definitely wants to be quite dark. Smaller extended arm also. The upper part of the torso, shoulders, I think can all be quite dark. But I'm going to take a little, I think this lavender, it's a Holbein lavender that if you've watched any of my videos, you know I'm in love with. But it's a slightly semi-opaque color. So it's lavender, but it has a little bit of white in it. So it's heavy, physically heavy. It sinks down through a wet wash like that and then floats up and makes these beautiful little blossoms that can really enliven the dark wash. It looks particularly good on dark green, but I think perhaps on this character it will look good as well. We'll see. And then his legs, I'll just become a little sketchier about them and let them just melt into the dark boat. Yeah, I think that's all right. I am glad I added the vine, but it looks pretty much like it's floating from the wall, and I don't want that. And I also think the painting needs a little bit more depth of value where the wall must meet the water, which is somewhere here. So I think that's all good. I can use a little hint of shadowing under the greenery. This is just some violet. Dry brush a few irregular marks down. A few up to just feather it into the main shape. And then do what I did before, but just slightly more intense. This is some sepia. I think I'll go right to the jadeite green. Not sure the Viridian had enough power to it. This jadeite is can be quite intense if you don't use a lot of water. Yes, that's the effect I want. I'm using a 1/2 inch flat, so I'll get some dry brush skip marks, which I definitely want. The jadeite also vibrates off that bright red beautifully. And I can use the blade end of the brush to apply a few watermarks. Then I'll swap out for some teal at the bottom. Not too much, just a little. So the value story is better. Some of these transitions aren't quite right, so I think my mist bottle, again, here under the boat, just merge those areas. At the bottom of the painting, I'll just let that run off the bottom. I do like that unexpected sparkle in the water, but I think there's a bit too much of it. So what I will do is take a small mop brush, a little bit more of that jadeite, and then work with that sparkle area to drop in some tone above, and then gently, with a little bit of added gravity, eat away some of that sparkle and leave some others, and just connect the upper portion to the bottom portion with gravity. Hopefully this will integrate that vine into the overall shape a little better, make it look like it's not quite so floating, which I think it does. Yeah, the way this boat melts into the background in the water is what I was hoping. I just don't want, it's just sort of a dance between clarity and obscurity, and trying to find the right balance, and then making that balance happen is it hard? No, we're just painting pictures, so nothing is that hard. But it can be a little tricky. So I added a little more depth of value to the very back of the boat, and then I think I'm going to take a little more of this lavender and just drop it into the back of the boat and see if I can feather all that together into this nice, soupy, indistinct mixture. Well, that whole look is very Venetian. All these different textures and colors just running together is very much the name of the game. This kind of painting I like, but it looks a little out of place with this. So the last thing I want to do is try to do a little light surgery on the bottom of the right side of the painting here to melt these tones together to look a little bit more like this side. So I think a little more of this jadeite green right over that neutral tint that I already put will probably melt it a little. Yep. wanted this very dark highlight there to just speak to the darkness up above and connect the two sides of the painting. A little worried I overdid it, but I think in the long run I didn't overdo it. I think it's going to be okay. It's just these last stages where you're just trying to balance the values and tones throughout the painting. So here, to add a little more balance, I'm dropping into this wet a few streaks of neutral tint. To try to get this side and that to connect visually a little bit better. It's fine. It's just starting to edge up on being a little finicky, and I don't want that. All right. Then I'll take this 1/2 inch flat, a little bit more of this teal, and just finish off this bottom. Yeah, and I think that's much better. It connects visually. You get this really strong rhythm of dark, light, dark, and then these dark shapes fit in this diagonal with the gondolier. And altogether works pretty well. So there may be a few things I do to tweak this as it dries, but not too much, I hope. I wanted it to look fairly fresh and not overworked. It's a nice combination, I think, of light pencil tone and watercolor technique. It expresses the pencil without dominating the painting. But the overall story is pretty much true to my little sketch. This bigger dark shape, the light thread reading through, and the mid-tone supporting cast member here. The addition of the gondolier and the boat, I think, really helps to connect the dark, the light, the mid-tone, and adds interest to this foreground shape. And I think we have a pretty successful toggle between foreground, midground, background. There's more noise outside. I'm gonna soften this edge just a little. But anyway, thank you so much again, as always, for your attention, for watching. I hope you learned something useful, got some tips, or at least some enjoyment out of this. And I will see you all again very soon.